Hello, Reluctant Messenger Unleashed Nation. Welcome to episode 23 as we begin part one of the last chapter in the Reluctant Messenger. It's chapter 11, In the Beginning. I'm your host, Donna Rebadow, and with me is author Candice Anderson.
And I want to welcome everyone back. I can't believe we are on the last chapter, Donna. This is crazy.
It's really hard to believe that we're here. And just so you know, we've broken it into two parts. And after we finish the second half, we're going to follow up with the bonus episode that we talked about. So open your books to page 204 and let's begin. Candy, you start out with a puzzle. You always start out with something. Tell us something so extraordinary that had occurred that you had difficulty processing it. That says a lot. Now, we've seen you grow chapter by chapter. You start out being skeptical, but over time, with lots of research and validations, you learned to trust the messengers. And you discovered wisdom in many of the messages, but this one was a little different. In that second paragraph, you tell the readers that you had an epiphany. It seemed that all puzzle pieces fell into place and formed a complete mosaic, like the one behind you. So I can't wait to hear what could have paled your experience, made your experience with the star systems, angels, and ascended masters seem so commonplace. Can you tell us what happened?
Absolutely. Donna, it started in early September 2015. Something really weird happened. I had this enormous surge of energy and it lasted for weeks. I'm a sleeper, Donna. I require a lot of sleep, like 10 hours, sometimes 11 hours each night. And then I still don't wake up refreshed. But for 2.5 weeks or so, I could not sleep. I'd wake up only after 2 or 3 hours, not 10 of sleep. It's like, what's going on? But you know what? The bizarre part about it, Donna, I was not tired. I did not suffer from any of those typical symptoms that we see with sleep deprivation, like fatigue, fuzzy thinking, irritability. And not only that, I went to work and I actually functioned better than usual. I was alert. I was working then, as a psychologist, and I moved through my workday with this sense of clarity that actually surprised me. I was efficient. I got more work done than usual. And that's saying something for sure, because I'm a workaholic. But I felt vibrant. Now, this is what you and I know is called a paradoxical effect. It's a reaction that's the opposite of what it should be. I did some research, what a surprise, and I discovered this study in PubMed. That's the National Institutes, of Health database. It was about the paradoxical effect, and it involved people and lack of sleep. I thought, this is perfect. This is going to explain it all to me. They studied 26 people and they put them in their sleep lab for 5 days. And they had all these electrodes and stuff on them. And just when they were getting to REM sleep, that's that rapid eye movement, that's what means you're dreaming. Just when they would get to the REM sleep, they woke them up. So for 5 days, these subjects never dreamed. And they woke them up all hours of the night. But what's interesting, in the days that followed these deprivation nights, none of them lost their alertness. They were not sleepy the next day. I thought, great, it's just like me. These people weren't sleepy the next day having their sleep disturbed. Doesn't make sense. Most people are suffering if their sleep is interrupted multiple times a night. Just ask parents of newborns. They'll agree. They'll tell you how tired you are the next day. You have these bags under your eyes and you can't function. So that's why it's called a paradoxical effect. It seemed depriving people of their dreams didn't affect their alertness the next day. Now, when I read this study, I thought, okay, I had this paradoxical effect. Last night, Donna, as I'm preparing for this episode, I pulled out my dream journal and I looked. Maybe I didn't have dreams either. Wrong. I had lots of entries for September 2015. So I was definitely experiencing REM sleep. So there was nothing about my experience that actually related to the study other than I didn't suffer any negative effects from this lack of sleep. I hit a wall. None of this explained why I couldn't sleep, nor did it explain why I felt so great the next day.
Candy, that's amazing to get up and have that much energy with just 2-3 hours of sleep for weeks. Because I know my college students sure wouldn't have been doing that. They were part of the non-paradoxical effects, always sleeping in my, I don't know if they were just sleeping because of not having rapid eye movement or it was my lecture. But for you, it was more than just functioning without sleep, wasn't it? There's a reason you couldn't sleep. You didn't need to sleep. You had so much energy, you no longer required as much sleep as you used to. So on page 205, you talk about getting up at 2 o'clock or so and go running. Tell us about that.
Oh, yeah. You're right, Donna. It wasn't that I could not sleep. It's like you said, I didn't need the same amount of sleep as I had before. I was wide awake after a few hours of sleeping. So for some odd reason, all of a sudden, I just felt like I needed to find my shorts, put on my tennis shoes, and go outside for a run. Okay, 2 o'clock, 2:30 in the morning. First of all, this is crazy for me to even think I could run. Let me give you some background here.
Okay.
Many years ago, back in the 1980s, mid 80s, I had my first severe back injury. I went for months without being able to sleep more than 2 hours a night because the pain was so severe. It was absolutely debilitating. Finally, after 6 months, my neurosurgeon prescribed me a TENS unit. Donna, you're familiar with TENS units. You're an acupuncturist. But for those who are not, let me explain. TENS, T-E-N-S. It's an acronym that stands for Transcutaneous Electrical Nerve Stimulator. Now, my description may not be the official one. You probably know the official description. But basically, I had this little machine that I would clip on my waistband or stick in a pocket, and it sent these electrical currents through wires to 4 different electrodes. And I would place these electrodes on the side of my spinal cord near my injury, and I would actually crisscross them. When you're injured, basically the pain signals, those signals from the pain travel from the spinal cord through nerves to head to the brain. But you know what? It's only when these impulses reach the brain that these signals are interpreted as pain. Ouch. So when you place those electrodes on the skin, close or right over those nerve pathways, and then you turn on the current, what you're doing is essentially scrambling the pain signal. You disrupt the message to the brain. It doesn't stop the pain, but it masks the pain. It doesn't hurt as bad. The pain doesn't register with its full intensity. I was in pretty bad shape back then, Donna. I never told you about how debilitating this was until just recently, but I could not, 6 months after my injury, I could not still get out of bed unassisted. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't function independently at all. I needed assistance with everything. So that tells you how severe this was. So 6 months after my injury, I am still unable to sit upright more than 2 or 3 hours a day. And Donna, that's not 2 or 3 hours at a time. That was 2 or 3 hours a day combined. But that TENS unit, I'll never forget it. I got it December 18th. I'll never forget the day. It was a lifesaver. All of a sudden, I could sit up. I could stand. Later, I began walking. I was able to start physical therapy. And eventually, I started back to work. And I managed to live with this pain. My pain tolerance increased, and I began to lead an almost normal life. There's not a lot of things about my life that's normal, but it was almost normal. But much later, I had multiple spinal surgeries that each one of them restored more of my function time after time. Now, let's get back to September 2015. I never thought that I would or could run again. So when this huge influx of energy came and I felt this overwhelming compulsion to run, this was crazy. To actually think about running, something that I had not done for almost 30 years, it didn't make sense. But I was compelled to do it. Donna, you were a professional athlete, and I'm certain you can speak to this from a physiological perspective. But here I was in 2015. I was 64 years old, and I had not run since I was in my mid-30s. So even without addressing the pain, let's just put that aside. Wouldn't you think it would take some time for a new runner to build strength and stamina? But guess what? That first day, I ran almost a mile without stopping. By mid-week, so just a few days later, I was running 3 miles without stopping. It was crazy.
Candy, everybody, Candy, this is a real physical miracle. This is a miracle. Person with, let's go over it, with your injuries, your age, that much time away from running, you can't do what you just said. You just can't do it. And so I'm glad you explained that, because I was really amazed when I read this part of the book. I was going, was she really serious? But I actually believe you, because all the things you've been through the previous 10 chapters. So my question, or what I would like to know is, did you face any kind of challenges? Because this is 30 years without running. And then you run 3 or 4 miles a day without training. And this is really cracking me up, because if you think about it, Candy, currently, I can't even run 20 times around the swimming pool in my backyard. And I know that's not even a mile. But Candy, you must have been thinking, what the heck's going on here? What went through your mind?
Everything was just so bizarre and so crazy about this. First of all, the running, I had no pain from it, but it seemed to energize me even more. I already had this huge influx of energy, and I was running to offload it, but it just energized me more. But you're absolutely right. This is so bizarre. And I knew something was stirring. I knew that this surge of energy was preparing me, but I didn't know what for. But I knew something was headed my way. And it started on September 29th, 2015 at 3 o'clock in the morning. Once again, I'm out running. I had been running for a couple weeks. It had become a habit. But on September 29th, I experienced a life-altering event. Now, I say this started on the 29th because it did, but it didn't end until October 4th.
Now, everybody get your seatbelts on, because this part is crazy. And let's break it down for you that might not have read the chapter. So think about it. First, there was this crazy energy experience. Then she goes out running when she shouldn't be able to. Then she has this September 29th, something happened on the 29th, a vision. And everyone, you can read about it beginning on page 205. So you had a vision. It lasted only a few minutes, but the experience of the vision lasted 5 days.
Yeah.
Each day you had a sort of flashback to that vision. And each time the messengers gave you a different interpretation of what you had seen, which I think is just remarkable. You viewed the vision through several filters that we're going to talk about: religion, astronomy, quantum physics. What an intersection of science and spirituality. Now let's go back to the beginning. So you're going to talk about what happened. Tell us what happened on that early morning, that first day on September 29th.
I was in the habit now of waking between 2 and 2:30 every morning and running. So I'm up at 3 in the morning on the 29th, just living my new life as a resurrected athlete. While running, I stopped dead in my tracks. So while my physical body remained motionless, a tumultuous whirlwind of energy propelled my awareness, my POE, point of existence, into a very deep cosmic abyss. I was completely surrounded by darkness. And Donna, it was so dark, I couldn't see anything. But then something caught my eye. I could barely make it out, but there were shadows moving within this darkness. It was the motion of those shadows, those dark clouds, that enabled me to distinguish it from the blackness of the void. But these clouds began swirling together. Without warning, they rushed toward a central point. Now, they gathered around this small glimmer of light. That light hadn't been there before, but it was there now, and it was starting to glow just a little bit. But I saw these waves of darkness move toward the light, and I expected them to like crash into the light, but they didn't. Just before reaching the light, these waves curled up and reversed direction. This created what I now know is a torus. It's that donut-shaped field of energy that we talked about in previous chapters. So as this toroidal field begins to build and it continues getting stronger, that light in the middle begins to shine brighter. And within moments, its intensity was greater than 1,000 suns. Now, I've never seen 1,000 suns, but this is one of those intuitive knowings that I've learned to trust. There was this frenzy of activity. The torus is getting larger and larger and stronger and stronger. It's swirling and it's spinning around this magnificent radiance, this absolute, dazzling, intense light. Now, let's do some unleashing, Donna. I didn't realize this until I was preparing for this episode. You know, we see this time and time again. I had a knowing this light, this was the light that the Bible talks about. When Jesus commands, let there be light, well, this was that light. So back to the vision. At this point, I'm the observer. My POE is observing these magnificent events as they unfold in real time at 3 o'clock in the morning while I'm running. Without warning, everything stopped. That torus field quit moving. It was like someone hit pause on a video. And I found myself suspended in time. When this happened, my POE, my point of existence, shifted. And I was no longer the observer. More of my awareness was actually in the vision.
You know, let me interrupt you here, Candy. So you're bringing up my favorite dot, the POE, point of existence. We've learned about, everybody should know. We talked about this before. But when you visualize the POE as a dot, it becomes a tool. So we've talked about it. You can either be able to turn it up to make it expand. So you can imagine it as a dial or a slider. But the more you dial it up or slide it over, the further you leave your body. So what you're describing now, you just dialed up your POE. You've gone from observer to participant in the vision. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
That's absolutely right. At the time, I didn't know it because when I had this experience, I didn't know about POEs. But what happens is we start off with our POEs in a constricted form, that dot. And then when we become the observer, that's when the fun begins. To be the observer, to actually be able to watch ourselves, we've already expanded enough to be aware that we are observing. So our POE, our awareness, is expanding from a single dot to a field of energy. Once we have become that observer, that's when we can take control, and that's when we use that dot as a tool. That's when we can push that slider further into the vision to dial up the experience. And that's what's happening. I was now in the vision, no longer just watching it. Yet, although everything had stopped and I'm in this timeless space, I knew that I hadn't. My true essence was still there. I was in that pause between breaths. I existed, the true me existed in that absolute stillness of this new world that was unfolding in front of my own eyes. And in slow motion, I turned toward the light and I realized there was movement. The light moved, almost like jumping. It like jumped and then paused and it moved again. And then I had this epiphany. I realized it was beating like a giant heart. This was new life forming in front of my own eyes. At this point, everything is moving again, although it's more like in slow motion. And then I had another moment of complete and absolute utter stillness. This turned out to be the calm before the storm. As I'm marveling at this light that's beating like a heart, without warning, Donna, it explodes and it sends billions of light fragments everywhere. That's when I knew. I knew I had witnessed creation. I wept. Let there be light.
That's probably why the chapter's called In the Beginning. What a powerful experience. And that pause, we talked about that pause between notes and music before. So actually time can stand still here, such as, like, I'll give you an example of athletic activity, but it doesn't stand still like this. However, I want people to know we can witness events while in an expanded state, whether it's an NDE like I had, or another type of what we call spiritually transformative events, which you have had. So let me give you another example, not an athletic event. During my NDE, I feel like I was gone underwater for a very long time. But my sister, you know, we talk about it, and she said she thought it only took 5 to 10 minutes, but she says she's guessing because she's not really sure, because it's almost like time stood still for her too. So I can absolutely attest to the fact that we can witness extraordinary things that we couldn't if our POEs were stuck in our physical bodies. But Candy, although the vision ended, it didn't. This was just the beginning. What you describe over the next 5 days, the vision replayed and expanded. But you saw this original scene when you got up and ran every day. This is when you receive the different interpretations of the vision. So let me read on page 206. Let me read. I learned of matters that had been foreign to me: black holes, singularities, gravity wells, waveforms, cosmic voids, dark energy, expansion of the universe, sacred geometry, stargates, holy cow, event horizons, entrainment, photon belts, and how stars were formed. You didn't know any of that. I'm going to continue in the book. I saw creation as it related to Christianity, energy, science, physics, quantum mechanics, and astronomy. Good heavens, end quote. We've been through so many examples in the book where messengers gave you information that was new to you, but not to other people. And here's another example. Almost everything the messengers just told you was new information. So here you are, you struggled for 5 days trying to figure out what the heck was going on. You probably didn't know what was going to happen on the 6th day. You're going, what's going on? But on that 5th day, everything came together and the messengers explained why this had occurred. You've got to share that with us, Candy.
Donna, it was early Sunday morning, October 4th, so 5 days later. And I received a download and a message that explained all these overlays, these interpretations that I've been having of the visions. I heard that I had become, quote, an instrument of the word. When I heard that phrase, the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi came to mind. You know, that first line that says, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Well, as an instrument of the word, I was to be a translator for this new energy. I say in my book that these different interpretations meant I would be reaching wider audiences through a shared vocabulary, using words they were comfortable with. So again, I'm at the point where I'm feeling almost overwhelmed with everything that's happened over the past 5 days. I'm trying to make sense of everything. And even though I had had 2 years of channeling under my belt, every once in a while I'd still have these doubts like, am I making this up? And I guess I needed some verification. Donna, did I ever get it later that day? You know, I had made that connection with St. Francis of Assisi, make me an instrument. Well, guess what? That day, October 4th, there was another connection to St. Francis of Assisi. October 4th is the day of the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. That's the day it's celebrated. I didn't even know there was a feast of St. Francis, much less people celebrated it. But it was the perfect confirmation. All these puzzle pieces tumbled into place with this validation. I smiled, and these words came out of my mouth with no warning. I see the light.
Holy cow. You know, Candy, when you talked about this in the book, so I'm reading the book and I'm reading this section. I didn't have the vocabulary at the time, but my POE left, traveled back to the time that when I was physically actually in Assisi. So I've been in Assisi, and he is called a patron saint of animals. And since I'm a huge dog lover, and it reminds me of my dear Sadie, this is a very special day for me too. So that's a confirmation for me, or validation. But true to form, you receive your validation. And we've seen this throughout the book, and I love it every time it occurs. When you start to doubt, the messengers send you information in the form of a book, a random piece of information. You find it quickly online. In this case, the information was already there. October 4th is the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi. But about the message, there are words that came after the fact. These represent the different overlays or interpretations of that original vision. And the vision is expanded over the 5 days. So you need to unleash that for us.
Okay, I will. But let me say something about how I found out about October 4th being the feast of St. Francis of Assisi. I didn't Google it. I didn't look up and say, why is this important? But for the first time ever, I decided to go to Unity Church of Naples for their Sunday services. I'd never been before. I went there, and when I was there, that's when I discovered that this was the feast. So it's actually even more significant that the information came to me because I chose to go in a church, and truth be told, I probably had not stepped inside a church for a dozen years unless it was for, you know, a wedding or some sort of event. So I was guided to go to church, and that's how I found out. But yeah, let me unleash this other part.
Okay.
Starting on page 207, we will see that this begins a new section. And this section is called the Word. So what we're doing now, we've already discussed the at least that first vision. Now we get the information about the vision. The Word. I did some biblical research for this episode, and in the King James Version, it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I thought that's appropriate. In the Good News translation, it says, in the beginning, the Word already existed. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this is all about words. Let's go to the Word. Now, I'm going to read from this first paragraph. We're on page 207, that first paragraph in the Message, and it says, in the beginning, God looked about and saw nothingness, for there was nothing and is nothing except him. There was no form. There was no space. There were no boundaries. Donna, in the first couple verses in Genesis, it says, in the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. Then it says, now the earth was formless, empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. The key words here are formless, empty, darkness over the surface of the deep. The messenger's words align with Genesis. So we're starting off with a religious overlay. In the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, God created the heavens and earth. But the messenger's part about no form, no space, and no boundaries, that represents the cosmic void from astronomy. As we go through these messages, the similarities to the Bible are pretty apparent. In the second paragraph of the Message on page 207, talks about the Creator calling forth, quote, formless energies of all that is. Now, I'm not going to read it. You can read it if you haven't, but he does this through a two-step process. First, he exhaled. That's kind of a call to action. It's awakening his life force. He's actually pushing out and expanding everything around him. And the second part is he inhales and he brings those energies to him. So let me unleash that. When he exhales, that represents dark energy. I researched this a few days ago and I discovered that, what a surprise, the expansion of the universe, which is what he was doing, is due to dark energy. I didn't know that.
That's correct.
Now, this takes on more significance with astronomy. This was the formless void being pushed away by his exhalation. It expands. Take a look at the correlation to dark energy. Dark energy is described as this mysterious force that scientists think makes up 72% of everything in the universe. And dark energy, astronomers think that it exerts a negative pressure, a pressure that repulses things. It's the opposite of gravity. So when the messengers say he exhales this dark energy, it pushes out and expands to the far reaches of the universe. That's exactly what the astronomers believe. Now let's unleash the second part, that great inhalation. That's when things change. I'm not going to read it, but in the next paragraph on the next page, 208, it describes how the great inhalation by the Creator produces a vacuum. Well, obviously, inhaling, producing a vacuum, that's gravity. This inhalation, like a magnet, brings those formless energies to his center. So we've got the push and the pull. First, the dark energy that pushes away, immediately followed by this gigantic vacuum, gravity coming to his center.
Wow. Can you let me see if I have this straight? I like the descriptions in the next couple of paragraphs too. The messengers describe this energy that's swirling and racing back toward the center like a gigantic tsunami. Keeps getting stronger as they race toward the center of this vortex created by the summons, his summons. So we have the religious aspects, which is his summons, and the energy waves created by gravity. Now next comes some references to one of my favorite topics, quantum mechanics, involving waveforms as it describes that torus. And we've seen that time and time again throughout the book, the donut-shaped field of energy, the toroidal field. So it says in the middle of the paragraph on page 208, and I'm going to just read that really quick. Waves of dark energy collapsed into particles. The energy began to enfold upon itself, creating layers upon layers, flooding into that deep center of stillness, the vacuum that had called them home. Now that last part, called them home. Now that brings us back to the religious aspect of home. So now we have science, religion, quantum, okay. The next paragraph personalize it even more. It says, the outer waves of energy continued to contract and rush toward the center. Now, you know, Candy, I love this multidimensional view. The messengers are taking a single vision that you had, but giving us different perspectives. There's something here for everybody. But let me read that last sentence of this paragraph. This great vortex, the boundless vacuum, gathered more and more photons of all that is until it formed the first black hole. Now we're back to science. I don't know if you realize that. This vortex, this vacuum, remember you called it gravity, it is gravity, brings photons, which is light of all that is, which brings in the spiritual nature of unity. And I find it interesting on St. Francis that you went to a church of unity. It's the spiritual nature of unity to form a black hole. Now, if you Google how a black hole is formed, we discover on NASA's website, so you can go to NASA's website and read that black holes are formed when the center of a massive star collapses in on itself. That's what the messengers have described here, folks. As the light, a massive star, so as a light rushes toward the center, in other words, it collapses back on itself and it forms a black hole. But did you catch that part? Did you get that? Messenger said it formed the first black hole, not just a black hole, but the first one. This was creation. It was the beginning. So now it gets a little esoteric on the next paragraph where it says, these waves of dark energy crashed into the center of the creator. And when it did, it produced my favorite part. It's all my favorite part. It produced awareness. And this new awareness, observed as form, grew from the formless. Boundaries were put into place where there hadn't been any boundaries before. Space was created where no space had existed before there were boundaries. The paragraph ends with this sentence, and everybody highlight it. It's really good. It says, awareness created consciousness. So in religious terms, the messengers told us that when they said awareness created consciousness, it equals our Father was born of the Holy Spirit. This goes back to that first paragraph and the first two verses of Genesis. Let's unleash that. Genesis, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now, am I interpreting all that correctly, Candy?
Absolutely, Donna. It's this weaving back and forth of the descriptions, connecting the vision with different belief systems. Now, I've been given the vision through religion and more broadly, spirituality, not to mention those filters of quantum mechanics and astronomy, but now we have awareness creating consciousness. Out of the formless, the void, came form. Out of the formlessness, which is the nature of the Holy Spirit, came the form known to some as God or Creator. It didn't stop here. That torus field continued to churn, building and recycling energy. That light in the center, we already knew it's like brighter than 1,000 suns. It continued expanding until it created nuclear fusion. Remember in the vision when I saw it exploding everywhere? This was a nuclear reaction. When I researched later, what a surprise, I discovered that nuclear fusion creates energy in the core of stars. But with gravity to contain that energy, that star will, guess what? Explode, creating what? A black hole. So this was a rerun of that event, or at least a rerun of the explanation, expanding on the explanation for that event that I saw. The message said this nuclear reaction produced a massive shift of energy, and it produced light that was powerful beyond measure. The last couple sentences in this paragraph on page 209 says, these great energies created a single point of light and energy called the singularity. A star was born. Later research revealed that, stuff I didn't know, a singularity is located deep in a gravity well at the center of a black hole. And scientists believe that the Big Bang began with the singularity. And that part about a star was born, in my later research, I learned that waves in molecular clouds, so that's those waves of the great inhalation and exhalation, that those waves cause nearby gases to compress and what? Form stars. Donna, that was exactly what I had seen. Now let's return to the esoteric filter, and let me read, I'm still on page 209. It's that last paragraph. This singularity, this brilliant star, exemplified the awareness of God, the Creator expressing. It represented the life force of our God, consciousness, creating the great central sun/star. This great light began to beat, just like I had seen, like a giant heart, taking on a life of its own. Its vibrations matched the music of all that is. So now we've moved from the great exhalation, moving that dark energy throughout the universe. That's the expansion of the universe, another concept you can read about online later. So we've moved from that great exhalation to the great inhalation, which is the contraction of the universe, another concept you can read about online later. The inhalation, that gravity pulls everything to the center of this great heart. And as these megalithic waves come toward the center, a torus field builds around this light that is beating like a heart. This was creation as it was formed. It was form coming from the formless. It was the Creator self-expressing. And I was a witness to it. You know, there's more to come: black holes, singularities, gravity wells, event horizons, just to name a few. But Donna, I knew absolutely nothing about this, but I found out about it.
You know, Candy, what a great gift. And I can feel your emotions from here. You know, to witness creation, like you said, the Creator self-expressing. You know, I've been places, done things, seen things, obviously nothing like this. So very, very great gift for you, Candy. As the messengers spoke that, you had a vision, of course, you had another vision. You could call it a vision within a vision. That's what we're going to say. So as the messengers had you revisit this original vision, this is where we begin to see the experience through the lens of astronomy. We see how a black hole is formed, how a singularity develops, and much more. And you were seeing this without knowing. You were seeing this, and it's just really powerful. It's a great ending chapter that says in the beginning. But we're taking longer on this chapter because there's a lot more important material to cover. That's a good stopping point, Candy. So let's stop here And let's go ahead in the next episode. We'll start off with that vision of you that you had in the black hole and singularity forming the vision within the vision. Okay. So folks, your homework is to finish this chapter, chapter 11. It's full of uncanny synchronicities, and our YouTube is full of uncanny synchronicities, and you don't want to miss it. So Candy, thank you for sharing such an extraordinary event that you both witnessed and experienced. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Oh, you're welcome, Donna. And once again, I have to thank you. You are just such a wonderful host and even a better friend. And I want to thank the audience, those who have been following us through this virtual book club. You know, last weekend, I went to a local authors fair here in Naples, Florida, and lots of people came in. There were like 53 authors and hundreds of people. You know, I'm sitting back there just talking to everyone who comes by, and it's great. And people would look at my book and I would say, you don't have to buy it. I mean, the first book, I would say, you don't have to buy it. Go online, go to this YouTube channel called The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed, and you can just follow this virtual book club. So I want to thank you for doing this for us. We love the audience. We love you. We love those thumbs up, any kind of positive rating. We love it when you share the episodes. And of course, I'm always looking for some new subscribers. So we couldn't do this without you, the audience. So thank you.
Thank you.
So until next time, when we finish the last chapter. Bye.
Bye. Be kind to each other.
That's right. Be kind.